I want to say good morning, good afternoon, or good night. Welcome to Lightning Ministries International's sermon today. And today's sermon is about transparency. What do I mean when I say that? Look at the water behind me that's flowing. It's very transparent in the sense that when you pick it up, it's clear in your hands. You can see through it. Not only that, you can see through it, you can see your hands through it. If we go to our Bible verse today, which is Ephesians 4:25, it says, "Therefore, having put away falsehood, let each one of us speak the truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another." What does that mean? Whether we're believers or not, and I'll probably lean more towards the believer side than the non-believer side, is that we're supposed to be transparent with one another, not deciding what we want to tell as a truth or as a non-truth. I'd give you a true example of that, sharing with someone once about our feelings towards another brother, and they took that to heart. Instead of saying, we still welcome the brother, we still love the brother, but for whatever reason, they felt like that we were, being non-Christian-like. Well, if I sit and think about it for a moment, and I would hope that you would do the same, is that when Jesus was dealing with the Pharisees and Sadducees during his time, was he nice to them? No, I think he saw right through them. He was being a lot more transparent than they were. They were trying to get him to not talk about the things that he was supposed to be, which was the Son of God, and the person that came to bring light into the world instead of darkness and rules and regulations, even to the point where when he was healing someone on the Sabbath, "Oh, look, you've broken one of our laws. You're not supposed to heal on the Sabbath." And the sad part with that is that he was trying to bring them back down to earth, that it was not about religion or a false truth, creating over 600 and some odd rules for people to follow each and every day so they could show some control. So they weren't really loving anybody. They were creating a false sense of security in a world that was supposed to be one of love and caring and being, a unity in your families and in your neighborhoods. I really want to go to another verse here that I've put down too, which is Psalms 139, 23 to 24, where it says, "To God, search me, O God, and know my heart." Well, if our heart is being true to us, then why would we want to not be truthful and transparent to our brothers and sisters? And you say, "Well, I don't want to hurt their feelings." But you know what? If you're not being honest with them, then you're not being honest with yourself. And if you can't be honest with yourself, how can you be honest with God? It goes on to say in that same verse, it says, "Try me and know my thoughts." What does it mean to try me and know my thoughts? You're the only one that knows your thoughts. No, that's not true. God knows your thoughts before you even think them. He knows your words before you even say them. And you're thinking to myself, maybe I should have just born mute. And it wouldn't have solved your problems anyway, because you're still thinking them anyway, even though you're not saying them. What else does it say in the verse? It says, "And see if there is any grievous way in me, and lead me in a way that is everlasting." Everlasting. The word says that we're supposed to become more Christ-like. And to become more Christ-like, we're supposed to become more transparent. We make excuses all day long why we're not willing to share or be honest or transparent, not only with the friends in our lives, but even our own immediate families, our wives, our kids. Now, that's not to say that we need to share everything from our past that would help or hinder anyone or cause them to stumble into their future. But in our present day, we should be honest, not about what we think or how we feel so much, but about the reality of how life is and how can we use what we're learning and hearing as a tool to benefit and encourage others instead of hinder them in doing evil. It says in verse 26 of this same chapter in Ephesians 4, it says, "Be angry and do not sin." What do you mean by that? It says, well, we're all going to disagree with each other. We're never going to always agree 100% with what one believes or the other one believes. And if we bring religion into that, then we give the opportunity for the devil to divide us and to steal our joy and to steal the joy of others, and also to steal God's joy and happiness that he's trying to project upon us. So what is he telling us to do? He says, control your anger and your transparency. Do your work, heartily, share truths with others. Well, I mean, everyone's got their own truth. You've got your truth, I've got my truth, and then Jesus got his truth. And his word says the truth will set you free. So I don't know how we can have our own truth. We may believe something to be true, but in truth, we're not sure because we heard it. Now, unless we experience the truth to say we can believe it, it's like, I put my hands on a hot stove and I got burned. Well, there's a truth. I can tell you truthfully that if you put your hands on the stove, you're going to burn your hand. That's not going to feel pleasant. And I would hopefully, in my truth to you, in telling you that, you're not going, well, let me experience that for myself and find out if what you're telling me is true. And that's where a lot of us make mistakes. We're not willing to accept a truth as a truth when it is true for those that have already experienced it. Even in Paul's day, even through all the stuff that he went through. He talked about that in the rages that are going on, the bitterness, the anger, the brawling, the slander. We're not being kind and forgiving one another. And what do I mean by that? You can forgive a brother for something that he's done, or a sister. It can just be a brother, or a mother, or father, cousin, aunt, uncle. You put the person into that category that you want. And then we try to come before the Lord in our essence, so to speak, or our spirits, in church, and think that we're righteous, but yet we have something against someone in our family, or we have something against a coworker. And while we don't have to necessarily walk in their way or believe their truth, that doesn't stop us from loving and being the Christ-like people that God is calling us to do. Let me read another little verse that I found that I thought was pretty interesting here. It says here in Galatians 2:20, it says, I have been crucified with Christ, and no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life that I now live is in the flesh. I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself up for me. Wow. You willing to give your truth up to God's truth? To live a life of transparency? Because you know what? God sees right through us. He sees through everyone. And if someone's giving you, the Spirit of God's giving you the ability to discernment, you're able to do that too, but in a loving way, in a way that shows your neighbor that you love them, regardless of whether they believe what you believe or think the way that you think. Because Jesus said that we're just supposed to love everyone. They're all his kids. So if we can take this truth that I'm sharing with you right now and put it in ourselves in a way that helps us to rethink that, in a way that we can be kind to one another and tenderhearted and forgiving for that matter, just as God and Christ forgave us. So I want to throw one more little verse at you. Really not a verse, I'm sorry. It's kind of more of a definition. It says, when you're transparent, you invite trust by revealing that you have nothing to hide. How many things are we hiding? You establish yourself as an honest and credible person in the eyes of others. Your name means something. Your name is your standard. The prospect of being open and vulnerable to make others see you more as transparent, I'm sure that makes you a little nervous. I'm kind of paraphrasing here. We live in a digital age. We can see it as a revolution here. And it's made, our transparency a matter of survival. I'm having to be honest with you right now. I'm having to be transparent, and in the Word it says I'm supposed to be transformed into the likeness of Christ. Well, if I can't be transparent with you, then how can I expect you to be transparent with me? No, I'm not perfect, and I don't profess to be perfect, and I make mistakes, and I have troubles and trials just like anyone else does. But if we're not willing to work together in our families, put aside our differences. What do I mean by that? You don't like this, and I don't like that. So what? But does that make us stop loving each other and being able to walk away and shake hands and say, I love you? You shouldn't. But that's kind of what we live in today. We're at a point where we've divided ourselves from our children, or our children have divided themselves from us because they don't think that we're, in the know of this generation. Like it's different now than it was when we were young. It's no different. The only difference is it's a different time. What does that mean? It means that it's a little bit further in the future, and I'm still here to live and talk about the things that I experienced in my life behind me, and now I'm able to share that with you as the truth. whether you're a teenager or you're an adult older than I am, that doesn't separate us from time. Actually, being older gives us a little bit more wisdom. It kind of keeps us humble in the sense that we can share some of our weaknesses and our stupidity, or whatever you want to call it, with those that are younger than us. And while they may not see that as a truth or understand it, and they want to go through it to themselves, then they look on the other end of it and go, you know what? I should have listened to you because you told me a truth and I wasn't wise enough or discerning enough, or we can use the word smart. I don't think some people are that smart about this stuff because they don't think it through. They're too busy to speak out a fallacy. They're too busy to be dishonest or hateful or angry or show, a dislike, for their brothers and sisters. So what this ministry is about truth, of truth in Jesus, and to put off our old self, which really belongs to the former manner, his former life, and the corruptness and the deceitful desires that fell into that. We're supposed to be renewed in our spirits and in our minds, and then we're supposed to put on the new self, which is created after we become born again and live in the God's truth in our righteousness and holiness. So God has asked me to start this ministry. Reluctant as I am, you would say, oh no, you're just another one of those church people, holy rollers. Well, you can call me whatever you want, but I can tell you that there's a truth in this, that I've experienced enough things in my life, and I'm not that young. I may look younger than I am, but let's put that aside as a piece of transparency. Maybe later I'll explain that to you, or you'll find out some other way how old I am. But that's irrelevant to me being transparent to you right now. The one thing that we see, and I believe in this society, is what Christ has given me this vision for. And while some may not see that as a truth, the truth is that the only reason we're here is because of Jesus. It's always been about him. It's always going to be about him. And until we get that one little snippet in our brains, we realize that nothing else matters except him. And I'm not saying we're supposed to work or we're not supposed to help others or do anything. Excuse me. That's a part of what you do when you become a believer. That's part of what you do when you become a Christian. And even if you're not a believer, you should live your life in an honorable way that helps others, regardless of whether you believe in Christ or not, or whether you want to follow him or not, or whether you want even want to look into who the man really was and what he really did. And believe me, there's plenty of facts out there, and that's a truth to prove to you that there is something more than what we just think we read about, or some book that's on the shelf that everybody seems to want to lean on in trouble, in times of storms that come into their lives. When things are going great, we don't trust God, or we don't lean on him, or we don't even look to him. So in this, I say to this, families, we need to get going in a direction that brings us back together. Not just in our family, but the families around us. And what do I mean by that? In our communities. How many of you actually know your neighbor? I'm not saying that you don't. Maybe you know them a little bit. Are they friends with you? Not intimate friends, but is there a relationship? Do you know what's going on in their lives? When you walk out to take the trash out and you see your neighbor, you go, hey neighbor. Instead of saying, hey neighbor, say, hey, how's it going? And they may or may not at that point want to be transparent. But if they are, regardless of whether they believe what you believe or not, it gives you an opportunity as a believer, or even as just a human being, to find out something about your neighbor that you didn't know, that maybe they lost a friend, that passed away, or a spouse, or they lost their job, or, their kids are struggling or whatever in another country where there's wars going on. I mean, the thoughts of this family thing is enormous, and that's really what it's all about. When we go home to be with Jesus, for those of us that choose to accept that truth, we're not going to be separated into our ethnic backgrounds, our religious backgrounds, our work backgrounds, or anything else. We're going to be together as a family, as a group. And we need to learn to work together here. That's really what this is all about. That's what we should be doing anyway. And everybody's arguing about masks, and everybody's arguing about the government and everything else. But what we're missing is the fact that The devil's trying to divide us, and let's just say you don't believe in the devil. Regardless of what you're going to do, our government is dividing you from your neighbors and your families. And the sad part, if I have to touch on that, your relative goes in the hospital with COVID and no one can visit them. And if they pass away, how disconnected is that? How sad is that? So let's stop thinking about what we can't do and start doing what we can do. Whether you wear a mask, whether you don't wear a mask, whether you get the shot, whether you don't get the shot, is irrelevant to the fact that we're human beings created by someone that I believe is Jehovah God. And that's me. Leave it at that for you. Regardless of whether you're watching this to see what kind of person I am, or if I'm just some other crazy religious nut. And that's not true either. I'm a human being. I have feelings. I care about people. And I believe that the God that created us cares about us too. And that's why he's asked me to start this ministry. And if the communities could start working together, then why don't we get our churches working together? The churches that you go to or may not go to. The churches that you watch on TV or may not watch on TV. The churches that you listen to through podcast or not through podcast. Whatever it is you may do, whatever your religious or spiritual process is into getting wherever you think you got to get or need to get to stay whole as a person, does not separate you from society. It does not divide you from society. You can divide it because you say, I believe this and you believe that, but there is only one truth. And I'm not going to ever deny that there's only one truth and that there's only one person that can get us to heaven. And there's no other way to get there except through him. You can believe what you want. I have no problem with that. That's not going to stop me from loving you or caring for you or giving you a water or giving you a hug or just being your friend or just being neighborly, however you want to look at it. But even in our churches, we're divided, In the area that I live in, there's a church on every corner. You would think with the church on every corner, our communities would be doing awesome, but they're not. They're divided. Because one church says, well, we don't believe what they believe. Well, I always ask everyone this. If you believe that Jesus Christ was the Son of God, he came to earth, was born, he lived, he died, crucified on a cross, and then he was buried and rose from the grave to ascend to heaven, and then promised us one day that he would return to take us to be with him, then what's our differences? Whether we wear our hair long or whether we wear shorts and flip-flops, we're still loved by God. Now, I will say this. We've lost respect for God. There's no reverence for that. There's no fear. And I think that's a thing that has become unlearned or not even taught. We're not teaching ourselves or learning about what we need to be doing to show respect, even not only to that, to our government, which we seem to dislike or don't like what they're doing at this time because we're not there. We're not sitting under that roof. We only hear what we hear through the media or through the news or whatever, and we know that, at least I believe, that every time you listen to the news, there's nothing good coming from it. It's always negative. And I know they have to report that. Well, they really don't have to report that. They can report other things that are showing the goodwill of people and the good things that are going on. And I can assure you there's a lot more good going on than there is bad. But we don't see a lot of that. So let me ask you this. If the families would reconcile their differences and start to work together as families, regardless of whether they like each other or not, because likes to change. It's a feeling. Like I don't like potato salad or you don't like barbecue sauce, but if you put the two together, to me it's great. I like it. But you may not. Dude, yeah, how could you do that? But you got to realize something. That's the difference. That's the differences that we make. Everybody's taste bud's a little bit different. Just like in the things that you speak, just like in the things that you want to see, just like in the things that you want to hear to fill your mind with, in being transparent. And that's not to say that you just go blurt out your life to someone, because we do have a lot of people in our society that like to gossip, because that's the way they get fed. But they don't understand that the hurt that they bring, because the person that said it to you or told you that was trusting you, because they needed someone to hear them. They didn't need someone to fix them, or to tell someone else something about their lives that doesn't help them or allow them to progress. So let's get back to the purpose of this vision. Families working together, communities working together. Know your neighbor. And if you don't, then join this ministry and look and see how we're going to show, and helpfully through God, and I know it's only through Him, to show what it means to work in a community. We see a lot of things going on right now in the devastation with the flooding going on in the Northeast and the hurricane that just came through Louisiana, and how, we're seeing people gathering together to bring the resources and materials and things to help try to, facilitate helping people that have nothing now, have lost everything. But the churches were doing that. And if the businesses were doing that, and I know some are, I'm not saying that there's not some doing that, would start to come together and work in the communities to help the communities. The churches would support the businesses would get supported by the communities would support the families would support the businesses, the communities and the families would support the church, and so on and so on and so on. We wouldn't need the government as much as we do, or we wouldn't be using the government as much as we do, because the church would be doing what God called them to do in the first place, to work together as a family, to build relationships between each other, and not be separated just because you have an indifference in the way that you think. I'm going to challenge you today. I'm going to challenge you with Ephesians. I'm going to challenge you with the things that Paul said. He gave us his principles in the beginning of this, is that we are family. And we were created in the likeness of God. Not to be selfish, self-centered, or self-righteous. God gave us a choice. We have the free will to decide whether we want a relationship or we don't. We're born into families. Some are divided right out of the gate. No dads, no moms, no mom or dad. Adoptions, rejection, whatever you want to call it. I even have that in my family. Divorce, adultery, rejection, abandonment. I'm no different. Alcoholism, drugs. I could sit there and look at the people in my past. Do I look at my life now as something that can't be transparent? No. Does what my life's past help anyone to the future? Maybe if they're going through that, I might be able to assist them and guide them in how God helped me to get past some of those things, or how it helped my family to get past the things that they did or said or thought. But that doesn't change the fact that we're all family on this planet. If you really think about it, and some may think of this not, we're all on a planet, we'll call it a big ball of dirt, or mud even. That would probably be more likely. Big ball of mud. And what we're doing in being here is that we're floating in space. We have no proof that there's life anywhere else other than where we are. And even though we're searching and seeking to find these things in our lives, here's the sad part. We're the only ones here, and we can't even take care of ourselves. So let me end this. Gotta go. Got some things I gotta do. Got some responsibilities. Is that if you want to give to this ministry, I would ask you to. If you're not able to give to this ministry, God still loves you. And thank you so much for this day. Lord, thank you for allowing everyone to be here. Thank you for allowing them to listen and hear what you've given me to say. And I thank and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you for listening.